This is what happened to 14-year-old Norma Lisbeth and how she was killed after getting into a fight with her school bully. Norma Lisbeth Ramos was a 14-year-old girl that lived in Teotihuacan, Mexico. She was the youngest of three. She had an older sister named Alma and an older brother named Omar. Now, we don't really know much about Norma, but her friends and family say that she used to be filled with so much happiness in life. She wanted to grow up, she wanted to become a nurse and help others. However, as Norma started to grow up, that light and happiness once inside of her started to quickly fade. This is because Norma was being bullied at school. Some of her friends have come forward and said that the bullying started all the way in elementary school. People would make fun of her skin color, they would call her morenita, they would make fun of the fact that she had curly hair. The kids were brutal to her, and most of the aggression came from another student named Asara Eileen. It seemed like Asara was obsessed with bullying and tormenting Norma. She would make fun of Norma's skin color, she would make fun of the fact that Norma's family didn't have a lot of money. She would even tell the other students, if you try to be nice to Norma, if you try to talk to her, if you try to be her friend, we're also going to bully you. Asara would hype up the other students, and the minute that Norma would step foot onto campus, the bullying would immediately begin. She would walk into a classroom and people would actually throw things at her. One of the few friends that Norma had came forward and told reporters that a couple of the classmates had actually threatened to physically assault Norma. One day, Norma went to the school bathroom and a couple of her classmates walked in and they tried to beat her up. Norma tried to put an end to it, and the classmates told her, if you snitch on us, then we will assault you. It seemed like the whole school was against her, so Norma actually did speak up and she told her professors about what was going on. She told them about the taunting, about the bullying, about the threats, but nothing was done about it. In fact, one of her teachers told her, girls will be girls. She basically tried to make it seem that this is what teenage girls do, that they bully each other, that they make fun of each other, and that that's just how things are. However, it wasn't just girls that were bullying Norma, it was the boys in the class as well. Literally everybody would taunt her, and on February 20th, 2023, Norma's main bully, Asara, confronted her and told her that the next day, on February 21st, she wanted to meet her outside of the school to get into a physical fight. And she told Norma that she better show up. Of course, Norma was scared, so she tried to tell the director of the school about the fight, but the director did not listen to her. The director told her, can you give me a moment? I'm really busy. And she turned around and ignored Norma. Norma just didn't know what to do. She had already told the professors about the bullying. She had told the director of the school, but no one cared. So she felt like the only option she had was to show up to the fight the next day and defend herself. The next day, on February 21st, 2023, the fight happened. There is footage of this fight and it's very intense. Asara is the one wearing the skirt and she just went absolutely crazy on Norma. At one point, she grabbed a stone and she started hitting Norma on the head with the stone. What's crazy is that there was a group of students just standing there watching this and cheering on the fight. At one point, Norma starts bleeding and the classmates actually laugh at her. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on what happened to 14-year-old Norma Lisbeth and how she died after getting into a fight with her school bully. There's a group of classmates just standing there watching the fight, cheering it on, and acting like this is some fun activity. Asara was punching Norma in the face and she even grabbed a stone and started hitting Norma on the head with the stone. Now, the only reason that the fight stopped is because a couple of the neighbors saw what was going on and they called the police. Everyone just kind of dispersed after the fight ended and Norma went to some of the neighbors to get some help. There's actually footage of this as well, and you can see Norma sitting on the rocks and her nose is bleeding and she just looks so injured. Neighbors are giving her tissue to stop the bleeding and they're telling her that help is on the way. Paramedics arrive to the scene and they take Norma to the hospital to treat her injuries. They tell the family that she has a broken nose, they give her some pills, and then they send her home. As a result of the fight, the director actually suspended Asara and Norma. They're going to be suspended from February 22nd to March 21st, but they would have to come back between March 6th and the 10th to take exams. The director also said that both families had to split the medical bills. And when Norma's family heard this, they were upset because they felt like Norma was a victim in this situation. She was the one that was being bullied, she's the one that was being threatened, and she was the one that got a broken nose and was hit on the head with a stone. Now, Asara's family wasn't upset because her daughter had just done something so brutal. They were upset at the fact that they had to split the medical bills. Norma's older sister, Alma, confronted Asara and said, look at what you did to my sister, you broke her nose. And according to Alma, Asara showed no signs of remorse. She actually started laughing, she was being cocky, and she was proud of what she had done. She told Alma, yeah, I beat up your sister, yeah, I broke her nose, but it's her fault. She should know how to defend herself better. This girl showed no remorse for what she had done. Norma was stuck at home during her suspension, and at first it seemed like all she had was a broken nose. However, as the day started to progress, Norma started to get sicker and sicker. She started to feel nauseous, she was getting dizzy, and she kept throwing up. Something just wasn't right, and on March 6, when Norma was supposed to go to the school to take her exam, she actually fainted and she was immediately rushed to the doctor. They did some tests on her and then they sent her back home with some more medication. However, nothing was helping, and every single day Norma continued to get sicker. Monday, March 13th, 2023, Norma woke up that day feeling sicker than ever. She was throwing up, she felt nauseous, and she went upstairs to her bedroom to get some rest. She called over her sister Alma and asked her if she could bring her a bucket because she felt like she was going to throw up. Alma brought her the bucket and she laid on the bed with her sister, just trying to comfort her. Alma says that one minute her sister Norma was talking and was awake, and then the next minute she wasn't. She stopped breathing and her eyes closed. They rushed her to the hospital, and that's when doctors told the family that Norma was dead. Turns out that she had way more than a broken nose. She actually had very severe head trauma, and this was because Asada had hit her on the head with a rock. In the end, Norma died from craniocerebral trauma. Family was just absolutely heartbroken by this, and they just wanted Asada to be caught and arrested for what she had done. According to some of Norma's friends, some of the classmates showed up to the funeral to make fun of her. Even after her death, she continued to be bullied. Okay, more in part 2. Part 3 on what happened to 14-year-old Norma Lisbeth and how she was killed after getting into a fight with her school bully. So yeah, according to this friend, even after her death, Norma continued to get bullied and taunted. The fact that classmates showed up to her funeral to make fun of her is wild. As for Asada, the one who killed Norma, she showed absolutely no sign of remorse. She never called the family to offer her condolences. She never took accountability for anything. In fact, after Norma died, she wasn't immediately arrested. It wasn't until the case started to go viral on social media that the investigators finally took the case seriously. Fired the director of the school, and they immediately began searching for Asada. And on March 18th, 2023, Asada was finally arrested. Now, since she is only 14 years old, she was sent to this correctional facility in Mexico that's specifically for minors. The place is called the Quinta del Bosque Correctional Facility, and at this facility, you go to workshops, you go to classes, you go to therapy, you basically do activities to try to become a better person. The maximum sentence that you can have at this facility is 5 years. Unfair that Asada took someone's life. She literally killed Norma. She hit her on the head with a rock, and all she might get is just 5 years at a correctional facility. A facility where you go to therapy and you go to workshops and you do like group activities. Just doesn't seem fair to a lot of people. If she felt grown enough to taunt Norma, to bully her, to assault her, and to fight her, then she should be grown enough to be charged as an adult. The fact that she was acting all cocky and proud in front of Alma and told her, yeah, I beat up your sister, yeah, I broke her nose, just shows the kind of person that Asada truly is. She showed absolutely no remorse, and the family feels that this is not justice. The family is happy that the director of the school was fired, but they also feel like the professors and the other classmates need to face some consequences. The professors knew about the bullying, but they didn't do anything to protect Norma. Family also feels like all the classmates that stood there and watched this happen should be held accountable. They should either get suspended or be expelled from school because they took part in the bullying. It's so heartbreaking that Norma tried to get help, but she didn't receive it. It's really sad that the last few months of her life she was filled with so much sadness, with so much heartbreak, and with so much disappointment. She did not deserve this, and we need to do better. Something needs to change, and I hope that everyone that needs to be held accountable for Norma's death is held accountable. My thoughts and prayers go out to her family. I am so sorry that this happened to her, and it's just so heartbreaking because she was just a couple of weeks away from her 15th birthday. Her birthday is on April 25th, and she was so excited to be turning 15 years old. It's just so unfortunate that she never got to make it and that her life was taken from her. Hope that Norma truly gets justice. Let's talk about what happened in Waco, Texas, and how there was a 51-day standoff between the FBI and members of a Christian sect called the Branch Davidians. On February 28, 1993, about 80 agents raided a religious compound in Waco, Texas to get the leader of the group, David Koresh, into releasing the women and children inside the compound and into essentially giving himself up. Paramount Plus with Showtime just launched a 5-part drama series about this event called Waco: The Aftermath. This series portrays the searing aftermath of the insane 1993 FBI standoff at the Branch Davidian compound. They go over the trials of the surviving members, and there's some amazing actors on the show, such as Michael Shannon, Giovanni Ribisi, so many others. Their performances are so good, and I love the music throughout the show. I love drama series, so I'm excited to watch this and see more of the aftermath of Waco. There are new episodes every single Friday, so make sure to go check out Waco: The Aftermath, streaming now on Paramount Plus with Showtime. This is what happened to 12-year-old Florencia Di Marco and how she told people that she was being abused, but nothing was done about it. Florencia was born on January 6, 2005 in Mendoza, Argentina to her 16-year-old mother, Karina. Karina was super young when she had her daughter, and the father of Florencia actually abandoned them and just left Karina to raise Florencia all on her own. Thankfully, Karina's family members stepped in and they helped her raise Florencia. In 2008, just a few years after Florencia was born, Karina met a man named Lucas Gomez. The two began dating, and then they eventually got married, making Lucas Florencia's stepfather. stepfather. Like I said, Florencia's biological father abandoned her, so now that she had Lucas, she felt like she was finally gonna have a father figure in her life. But Lucas and Karina had 2 sons together, and Karina was actually pregnant with their 3rd child together, a baby girl. Friends and family members described Florencia as being very timid and secluded. She wasn't allowed to go anywhere by herself, she didn't really have that many friends, and she didn't go to any sleepovers. She honestly spent the majority of her time on Facebook, and she liked to go on there, chat with her classmates, play games, post photos of herself, taking selfies, doing peace signs. Karina says that she would monitor everything that Florencia did on Facebook just to make sure that she wasn't talking to any strangers or like anything weird was happening. On Tuesday, March 21st, 2017, Karina went into labor and she was hospitalized to give birth to her new baby girl. Now, while Karina was in the hospital giving birth to their new child, Lucas was in charge of taking care of the household. He was in charge of making sure that Florencia and the 2 boys were taken care of. The day after, on Wednesday, March 22nd, Lucas was in charge of taking Florencia to school and then picking her up. That morning, he says he dropped her off at the front of the school at 8 o'clock in the morning. Then, at around noon, he went back to the school to pick up Florencia. However, she wasn't there. He started looking all over the school for her. He even went back home just in case she had left school early, but she was nowhere to be found. He was freaking out, so he called the police and he reported his 12-year-old stepdaughter as missing. At first, people were thinking that maybe Florencia had met someone on Facebook and she had ran away with them. However, that was quickly ruled out after police went through her social media and found no evidence of that. Stepfather Lucas and the mother Karina truly believed that either someone abducted Florencia or that she had ran away. They did a handful of interviews crying, begging her to come home. They told her that she wasn't in trouble and that they just wanted her to be safe and sound. Karina was just heartbroken. I mean, she just gave birth to a new baby girl, and then the day after, her 12-year-old daughter goes missing. The parents were asking for anyone with any information about what happened to Florencia to please call in any tips, and someone did. A woman messaged Karina on WhatsApp and said that she had found a backpack, and inside this backpack was a notebook that belonged to Florencia. This backpack was found in a remote field, and inside, police found a dictionary. And there were 4 words highlighted in the dictionary: lasso, stick, prostitution, and brother-in-law. Police see this dictionary and these words, and they're just so confused, like, what does this mean? Investigators end up finding a camera that covers the field where the backpack was found. On the surveillance footage, you can see a man throwing the backpack into the field. And this man looks exactly like Lucas Gomez, Florencia's stepfather. Okay, more in part 2. Part 2 on what happened to 12-year-old Florencia Di Marco and how she told people she was being abused, but nothing was done about it. So police look at the surveillance footage and they see a man that looks exactly like Lucas throwing the backpack into the field. They're so confused by this, so they go ask some of the neighbors, and the neighbors say that yes, they also saw a man that looked just like Lucas walking around the area. They start digging deeper into this, and they go to Florencia's school to look at the surveillance footage from the day that she went missing. Because remember, Lucas says that morning he dropped Florencia off at 8 o'clock. So they look at the footage, and that's when they realize that Lucas was lying. The footage shows Lucas in his van just driving by the school. He never stopped, he never parked, he never dropped off Florencia. She never got out of the car. Investigators start speaking to the teachers and the administrators of the school, and they all confirm that Florencia never made it to class that morning. So once again, Lucas was caught in another lie. And the day after police found this footage, 12-year-old Florencia Di Marco was finally found. But unfortunately, it was not in the way that everyone had hoped for. And just a trigger warning, what I'm going to say next is disturbing. Florencia's body was discovered under a bridge by fishermen and neighbors in a grassy area in San Luis, about 35 miles away from her home. She was found naked from the waist down, her hands were tied, and she was covered in bruises. The neighbors and the fishermen said that they aren't even medical professionals, but by the look of Florencia's body, they could tell that she had been severely essayed. The medical examiner concluded that Florencia was severely R-worded before her death, and that this wasn't the first time that this had happened. She actually had bruises and injuries and marks on her body from years ago, which meant that Florencia was being essayed for years. She also had defensive wounds on her, so that meant that she fought back whoever attacked and killed her. As for her cause of death, the medical examiner concluded that she was strangled to death by a lasso. What's weird is that when police found her backpack, the dictionary had the word lasso highlighted, which makes them believe that maybe she had been threatened to be killed by a lasso beforehand and that she had opened up the dictionary to see what it meant. She also had the word prostitution, stick, and brother-in-law highlighted. So what did all of this mean? 3 days after Florencia's body was found, her stepfather Lucas was arrested. He was charged with essaying her, and he was also charged with her murder. Now he claims that he was completely innocent, that he never abused her, and that he didn't kill her. Now, as for the mother, Karina says that she had no idea that any of this was happening to her daughter. However, a couple of teachers and friends of the family have come out and said that that wasn't true. Some teachers from Florencia's elementary school said that one time Florencia told them, "My father caresses me." They thought this was weird, so they reported it to Karina, and Karina said, "Oh, my daughter is lying." And the school just didn't do anything else about it. They just kind of took Karina's word and they didn't report it to the police, nothing. Florencia also told one of her teachers that her stepfather would come into her room at night and grope her. Karina knew about this, but once again, nothing was done about it. Even the teachers, I feel like they should have just called the police and ignored what Karina was saying and figured out if this was actually true or not. Karina was later arrested for letting the abuse happen and she was sentenced to 18 years. As for Lucas, he actually took his own life while in prison and he left a letter behind saying that he had found Florencia dead in her room and that he freaked out and that's why he decided to throw her body over the bridge. But no one believes him. It breaks my heart that Florencia asked for help but didn't get it. This is what happened to 8-year-old Cherish Periwinkle and how she was taken from a Walmart by this man. Cherish was born on December 24th, 2004 in Jacksonville, Florida to her mother Rain Periwinkle and her father Billy Giroux. Everyone says that Cherish was a happy child and that she always had a smile on her face. Wanted to be just like her mother Rain when she grew up and she would even wear Rain's clothes, her heels, play with her makeup, everything. She recently learned how to ride a bike without her training wheels and she was just like every other kid. She wanted to be happy, she wanted to live life and just be with her family. Now as for her parents were not together. Billy lived in California with a new wife and Rain lived in Florida with Cherish. At the time, Rain had a boyfriend and she actually gave birth to 2 little girls. So now Cherish had 2 new half-sisters. On June 21st, 2013, 8-year-old Cherish Periwinkle was getting ready to fly to California to go visit her dad Billy for the summer. She was packing her bags, washing her hair, and that's when she decided that she wanted to go get some new clothes for the trip. Rain agreed to go shopping and her boyfriend gave her $100, and this $100 was supposed to be used to buy the girls new clothes, to buy food, to buy household items, and then there was supposed to be money left over to take Cherish to the airport tomorrow and pay for a taxi. So they were on a budget and they decided to go to the dollar store to do the shopping. Now, at the time, Rain didn't have a car, but the dollar store was only 20 minutes away walking, so she decided to walk there with Cherish and the 2 other girls. Now at the dollar store, she wanted to buy one of her daughters this black dress, but she didn't know if she would have enough money to buy it. So she was in the checkout line trying to figure out how to buy this dress, and that's when she was approached by a 59-year-old man named Donald Smith. Donald came up to her and said, "If you want the dress, I'll buy it for you." At first, Rain was kind of creeped out by this man because she had seen him in the store earlier. When she was in the shoe section trying on shoes, she noticed that this man was just standing there watching her. So she figured that maybe this man was going to rob her, and she was a little bit nervous when he approached her. But then he calmed her down and said that he also had little ones of his own and that she had her hands full and that he just wanted to help her. He also told her that his wife was on the way to give him a $150 gift card to Walmart and that if she wanted it, she could use it. After learning that he had a wife and that he also had little ones, she began to trust him. She felt like he wasn't going to rob her and that this was just an old, sweet man that wanted to help her out. So she agreed to take the gift card. They all walked outside to the Dollar Tree parking lot and just waited for Donald's wife to come by. While they were waiting, it started to rain. Now again, Rain doesn't have her own car, so she was kind of thinking, how am I going to get back home in the rain with 3 young children? And on top of that, the wife was taking forever to get there, and Rain kept asking Donald, "Where's your wife?" Donald would just tell her, "Don't worry, she's on her way, she's going to be here soon." However, once it started to rain, Donald told Rain, "Why don't I drive you to Walmart and my wife can meet us there?" And he was driving this white van that looked really suspicious, and Rain just didn't know what to do. And Donald could tell that she was worried about this, so he said, "Listen, you can trust me. Here's my driver's license. Look at my information. You're gonna be fine." And because of that, Rain decided to trust him and she got in the van with her 3 young children. As for the van, there were blinds on the windows, there was no middle seat, and the front passenger seat was pushed all the way down. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on what happened to 8-year-old Cherish Periwinkle and how she was taken from a Walmart by this man. So they all get inside the van and they start driving to Walmart, which is about 10 minutes away, and as they're driving, Donald asks Rain how old she is and how old her children are. She tells him their age, and then she asks Donald, "Where's your wife? Are you sure she's meeting us at Walmart?" And he says, "Yes, don't worry, she'll be there soon." 10 minutes later, they make it to the Walmart, and Rain starts shopping. Now remember, she thinks that she's getting $150 from Donald's wife, so she just starts adding things to the cart. Now while she's shopping, Cherish and the girls are kind of playing around, and Donald is just standing there watching them. He wasn't really shopping for himself, but at one point, he did end up adding something to the cart that Rain had. And what he added was rope. That was it, just some rope. They continue shopping, and at one point, Donald asks Rain if he can take Cherish to the dressing room. And Rain agrees. She agrees to let this man that she does not know take her 8-year-old little girl to the dressing room by themselves. So Donald and Cherish go to the dressing room, and he brings Cherish these really high heels. These heels were obviously for a grown woman, and Cherish wanted to try them on, but that's when Rain saw that he was giving her these heels, and she said no. That these heels were inappropriate, and that she wouldn't even wear these type of heels herself. After that, they continue shopping, and Donald takes Cherish to the dressing room once again. again. At this point, Donald's wife has still not shown up. Rain starts to get worried about this, so she asks Donald, "Where's your wife? Like, is she actually coming?" And once again, Donald calms her down and says, "Yes, she will be here soon." 10:25 p.m. rolls around, and that's when Walmart makes an announcement saying that they're going to be closing soon. At this point, Rain realizes that it's getting late and that she hasn't fed her daughter's dinner yet. There was a McDonald's inside the Walmart, and Donald sees this and tells Rain, "Why don't we just eat McDonald's? It's inside the store, it's cheap, and the kids will love it." He even tells Rain, "I'll go with Cherish to get the McDonald's while you continue shopping, and then we'll all meet up and eat together." And Rain agrees to this plan. She lets Donald go with her 8-year-old daughter to McDonald's. Now granted, the McDonald's was inside the store, so it's not like they had to physically leave, but still, she let this man just walk off with her daughter by themselves. Cherish and Donald start walking in the direction of the McDonald's, but instead of going inside, they just walk past it. You can see them on footage, leaving the Walmart and getting inside Donald's white van. 20 minutes later, Rain is ready to check out, but she realizes that Donald and Cherish are still not back, and remember, he's supposed to give her the $150 gift card. So she starts looking for Donald and Cherish, but they're nowhere to be found. She heads over to the McDonald's area and sees that the McDonald's was actually closed. That means that Donald and Cherish never made it there. Runs out to the parking lot and she asks someone to call 911. Police put out the word that they're looking for a white van, and the next day at 9 a.m., this white van is spotted driving along the highway. Police pull it over, and in the driver's seat is Donald Smith. However, Cherish is nowhere to be found. Now, Donald's lower half was soaking wet, so they figured that maybe he left her body in a body of water. And they were right. 8-year-old Cherish's body was found underwater, weighted down by bricks and debris under a tree in a creek. She had been brutally R-worded and strangled with a rope, presumably the same rope that Donald had bought. In the end, Donald Smith was sentenced to death. During the trial, it was revealed that Donald was a convicted sex offender and had crimes dating all the way back to the 70s. He also tried to blame Cherish for her death and said, "Oh, well, she followed me to the van. I had to kill her." What he did is truly disturbing, and he never even had a wife in the first place. As for the mother, Rain, a lot of people blame her for what happened to her 8-year-old daughter. They blame her for being too trusting and for letting Donald go to the changing room with Cherish and for letting her walk away by themselves. This is just such a heartbreaking case, and my thoughts and prayers go out to Cherish his family. Please be careful who you let around your kids, and you can just never be too trusting. Let's talk about what happened to 4-year-old Paulette Ibarra and how she went missing but was later found between her bed. Paulette Ibarra was born on July 20th, 2005 in Mexico City. She was born to her parents Mauricio and Lisette Fara, and she had an older sister named Lisette, named after their mom. Now, Paulette was born prematurely. She was born 25 weeks into her mom's pregnancy, when usually a pregnancy lasts about 40 weeks. When she was born, she only weighed 1 pound and 7 ounces. Now, Paulette's parents were told that she would most likely never be able to walk or talk or just function normally. And as she grew up, she did have some developmental delays and some physical disabilities, but she was doing a lot better than the doctors expected her to. The family lived in a large skyrise apartment in Mexico City, and they actually had 2 live-in nannies who were sisters, Erica and Martha, who lived with the family, and they would help take care of the 2 girls, but mainly Paulette. On March 22nd, 2009, nannies Erica and Martha woke up and started getting the girls ready for school. Now, Paulette's older sister, Lisette, was 7 years old, so she actually started school earlier than Paulette. So in the morning, the nannies would get Lisette ready for school, they would walk her to the bus stop, and then they would come back to the apartment and wake up Paulette. That morning, they did their normal routine, and when they went into Paulette's bedroom to wake her up, she wasn't there. Erica started looking all over the bedroom to see if maybe Paulette was hiding somewhere, but she wasn't. She goes to the kitchen area to look for Paulette, and that's when she hears a noise coming from the living room. She goes to see what the noise is, thinking that it's Paulette, but no, it's actually Mauricio, Paulette's father. Erica asks him, "Where's Paulette?" And he says, "I have no idea, I haven't seen her." Erica explains the situation to Mauricio, and he says, "Go check the main bedroom, maybe she's in bed with Lisette." So Erica goes over to Mauricio and Lisette's bedroom, but Paulette is not there. Erica wakes up Lisette and tells her, "Your daughter is missing," and that's when Lisette wakes up and says, maybe she went to go play on the playground downstairs, like she has to be somewhere. Erica and her sister Martha started looking all over the apartment building. They looked in the elevators, they looked in the lobby, they looked everywhere. And while the nannies were doing this, Lisette was in her kitchen just smoking a cigarette and having a cup of coffee. She wasn't even looking for her daughter or freaking out. Meanwhile, Mauricio was kind of just opening random closets to see if Paulette was there, but he wasn't really looking that thoroughly. Now, the nannies thought this was weird. I mean, if your daughter is missing, you wouldn't just sit there and smoke a cigarette and have a cup of coffee. Paulette was nowhere to be found, so police get called to the scene and they start investigating the entire apartment. They're looking for signs of a forced entry, any broken glass. They're just trying to figure out what happened. They also checked to see if anything was stolen or if anything was missing, maybe it was a robbery gone wrong, but no, everything was there besides Paulette. They also checked the apartment building surveillance footage, but there was no footage of Paulette ever leaving. So that meant that she was somewhere inside inside this building. Weeks would go by without any answers, and on March 31st, 2009, forensic experts were inside Paulette's bedroom looking for clues when they pulled back the blanket and found Paulette. She was found between her mattress and the end of the bed. Okay, more in part 2. Part 2 on what happened to 4-year-old Paulette Ibarra and how she went missing but was later found between her bed. So forensic experts pulled back the blanket, and that's when they find Paulette's body wedged between the mattress and the edge of the bed. The blanket Paulette was wrapped in was covered in blood that one of the experts immediately shouted they beat her, because that's what their first opinion was, seeing the blanket and seeing how Paulette was found. However, later it was discovered that it was decomposition fluid and not blood. After discovering her body, police believed that somehow Paulette had climbed down to the edge of her bed and had accidentally gotten stuck between the mattress and the edge. So they believed that this was most likely an accident. An autopsy was conducted, and this determined that her cause of death was asphyxiation and that this had happened because she had been wrapped under her blankets. Autopsy also said that Paulette's last meal was 5 hours before her death, and that she had died 5 to 9 days before her death. She had no signs of physical abuse or SA, and there were also no drugs in her system. Now, when this went public, a lot of people were confused as to how no one realized that Paulette was there for 9 days. The day Paulette went missing on March 22nd, police arrived to the scene and they looked inside her bedroom, but no one found her body. During her disappearance, news reporters had gone to her bedroom, they had sat on the bed with Lisette, done interviews, and yet no one realized that Paulette's body was there. A lot of people just find it odd how Lisette and all these people were sitting on the bed and no one smelled any type of decay. No one realized that there was a body there. Nothing. One of Lisette's friends, Amanda, even slept in Paulette's bed after her disappearance and yet didn't realize that Paulette's body was there. The nannies had even changed the sheets a couple of times, so a lot of people are just confused as to how this happened. Now, police actually had the nannies do a reconstruction of how they made the bed, and after doing the reconstruction, they determined that it is possible that the nannies did not see the body because of how it was wedged between the bed. So it is possible that while they were changing the sheets, they did not see Paulette's body. But I mean, at one point, tracker dogs had also been brought into the bedroom and they never picked up any scent. So a lot of people are confused and they don't feel like this was an accident. A lot of people started to speculate that either Paulette's parents, Mauricio and Lisette, or the nannies were involved. People were specifically focusing on Lisette because she had made some odd comments to the press, such as, oh, maybe my daughter got abducted by aliens, or maybe she got abducted by Harry Potter. She also said, if I lose Paulette, I still have another daughter. People were also thinking that maybe the nannies had done it, maybe it was some type of accident. I mean, there were just so many theories and speculation about this case. Paulette's funeral was on April 6th, and after that, her case kind of went cold. To this day, no one has ever been arrested for Paulette's death. On May 3rd, 2017, Paulette's body was actually exhumed and cremated. So now if police want to go back to see if there's any type of evidence on her body, they can't. It's just really sad. I mean, Paulette was only 4 years old. It's sad that there isn't any type of justice, but hopefully the truth will come out. Let me know what you guys think about this down below. This is what happened to 4-year-old Luz Gonzalez and how she was killed while her mom tied her shoes. The family is originally from Mexico, but at the time, Luz lived in Brooklyn, New York with her mother, Reina. And she was just honestly the cutest little 4-year-old girl. She was just absolutely adorable and just so nice and kind to everyone. On Sunday, June 24th, 2018, Luz and her mother were walking outside of this laundromat called the Clean City Laundromat in New York. They were walking along the sidewalk, but as you can see, this whole parking lot is just a mess. There is no division between the parking lot and the sidewalk, so if someone reverses from the laundromat, they literally have to drive over the sidewalk. It was just not a safe sidewalk, and Luz was riding her scooter up and down the sidewalk, having fun with her mother following closely behind. Now, as she's riding her scooter, her shoe actually falls off, so Luz gets off the scooter and she goes over to pick up her shoe. Luz tried to put the shoe on herself, but she was 4 years old at this time, so she was struggling to do so, and that's when her mother Reina decided to bend down and help her daughter. So Reina bent down to tie her daughter's shoe, and as you can see, they're still on the sidewalk. They're not in the parking lot, they're not in the middle of the road, like they're literally on the sidewalk, which is meant for pedestrians. But again, this parking lot and this sidewalk were built incorrectly, so in order for someone to back out or get inside the laundromat, they literally have to drive over the sidewalk. So as you can see, Luz and her mother are crouched down on the ground trying to put on her shoe when all of a sudden 38-year-old Jeanette Maria, who is driving this black SUV, starts to back out of the parking lot. Again, Luz and her mother are low on the ground. It's not like Reina is standing up and is super obvious, but at the same time, when you're backing out, you should always be aware of your surroundings. So Jeanette backs out of the parking lot, and as you can see, Luz and her mother were right in front of her. As she gets ready to peel out of the parking lot, she runs over 4-year-old Luz and her mother Reina. After she ran them over, Jeanette stopped because she obviously realized that she had hit something. So she stopped the car, she took a little bit of a pause, and then she just continued driving. She just drove off and she left Luz and Reina alone on the sidewalk. She didn't call the police, she didn't get out of her car to check, what she had hit, nothing. Which is just crazy because her car literally shook after running over 2 people. She obviously was aware that she had hit something, but she didn't care enough to get out and look at what had happened. Now people saw all of this go down, so they immediately ran over to Luz and her mother and tried to call for help. There's actually video footage of Reina just sitting on the ground hugging her daughter, and she just looks like she's in shock. Reina had a really bad injury to her leg, but the injuries to her daughter Luz were much more severe. Police were informed about what had happened, and they actually pulled over the driver, Jeanette Maria, about 4 blocks away from the laundromat. Police informed her that she had just ran over a 4-year-old girl and her mother, and Jeanette was in complete shock. She said she had no idea how this had happened and that she had no idea she had hit someone. She denies everything, and then the police just let her go. Okay, I'm running out of time. More in part 2. Part 2 on what happened to 4-year-old Luz Gonzalez and how she was killed while her mother tied her shoes. So police pull over Jeanette, they tell her that she just ran over 2 people and that she fled the scene, and then they just let her go. She gets back inside her car, she drives away, and she heads over to a family barbecue and she enjoys the rest of her Sunday. As if nothing happened, as if she didn't just run over a 4-year-old girl and her mother. Meanwhile, Luz and her mother are immediately rushed to the hospital, and unfortunately, Luz did not make it. Doctors did everything they could to save Luz's life, but unfortunately her injuries were way too severe. Luz passed away, and now her mother Reina was just left there wondering what to do next. Police informed Jeanette that she has now killed a 4-year-old girl, and she continues to deny everything. She says she has no idea that she ran over anybody or hit anything, but yet when you watch the surveillance video, you can clearly see her take a pause after hitting them, so she obviously knew that she hit something. 2 days after the incident, a family friend of Jeanette's came out and said she doesn't really know what happened, she wants to talk to them, the family, when the time comes. This family friend also said that she was absolutely broken by what had happened. Even after looking at the surveillance video of Jeanette running over Luz and her mother, police decided to not charge her with anything. This immediately caused an uproar in the community, and over 200 people gathered together to march and demand justice. No one understood how this lady was free. I mean, she literally ran over 2 people and killed a 4-year-old girl. Yet nothing was happening to her. She wasn't arrested, she wasn't put in jail, nothing. This is when rumors started to circulate that Jeanette actually had a brother that was a police officer. And because of her brother, that's how she was able to avoid charges. There never has been any type of confirmation that Jeanette does have a brother that works for the police force, but that's what a lot of people believe. There were also rumors stating that Jeanette's brother and her family had threatened Luz's family and said, if you continue to press charges against us, we will call ICE and get you deported. This mother is grieving the death of her 4-year-old daughter. She had to witness this brutal incident, and if those rumors are true and the family was threatening to report her to ICE, that's just insane. This honestly scared Reina and the rest of her family. They didn't want to make more noise about this because they were worried that they would get deported. After Luz was killed, she was flown to Mexico to be buried there, and her parents didn't even go because they feared deportation. It just breaks my heart that they couldn't even go bury their child. To this day, in May of 2023, there is no real justice for 4-year-old Luz Gonzalez. According to some articles, Jeanette's license was revoked, and in 2020, just 2 years after Luz's death, the district attorney announced that they were going to charge her with failure to exercise due care. But I haven't really seen an update since 2020, so I don't know if they actually charged her. I don't know if she did get any type of punishment. Nothing. It just breaks my heart that Luz was killed in such a brutal way and has received no justice. Is the petition open to get justice for Luz Gonzalez? So I will keep you guys posted if anything else happens with her case. Please just stay vigilant and be more aware of your surroundings while driving. Let's talk about the true story behind Candy on Hulu and Love and Death on HBO Max and how Betty Gore was axed 41 times. Betty Gore was born on January 9th, 1950, and while she was attending college, she met a teaching assistant named Alan Gore through one of her classes. The 2 of them immediately hit it off, they began dating, and in 1970, Alan and Betty decided to get married. Soon after their wedding, they had their first daughter named Alyssa, and after this, they decided to move to the small town of Wiley, Texas to start a new life. At first, their marriage seemed to be great. They were very in love with each other and they were excited to grow their family. However, according to reports, Betty did struggle with anxiety and occasional depression. Alan would often have to travel for work, so this meant that Betty was home alone with Alyssa, and this would just cause her a lot of anxiety. She would constantly be calling his office to check in on him. She would call the hotel he was staying at just to talk to him. The traveling was causing a lot of issues in their relationship, and since they had just moved to a new town, Betty didn't really have a lot of friends. She wanted to be more active in the community, so she decided to join her local church, and that's when she began making friends. She started to become friends with a woman named Candace Montgomery, also known as Candy. Both sang in the choir, and the reason they started to become closer is because Betty's daughter, Alyssa, started to grow closer to Candy's daughter. Now, a little bit about Candy. She was married to a man named Pat Montgomery, and the two of them lived a very comfortable life in Wiley, Texas. Her husband had a very good job, so she was able to stay home and take care of their two kids. And she had a very nice house. They actually called her house the party house because that's where everyone would get together to hang out. She was friends with everyone in the community. I mean, she was kind of like your typical PTA mom. But even though Betty had joined the church and had started making new friends, things between her and Alan were still not good. She even confided in her friend Candy and told her that her and Alan did not have sex. She just didn't know what else to do or how to get the sparks going again. However, Betty ended up getting pregnant with a second daughter, and she thought that this would change things between her and Alan. And it somewhat did. He was excited about their second daughter. Candy was excited about this as well. She even threw Betty a baby shower at her own house. Alan even told Betty that they were going to take a trip to Europe, just the two of them without children, so that they could reconnect and just be with each other. So it seemed like things were going well. On Friday, June 13th, 1990, Alan was away on a business trip in Minnesota, and Betty was at home taking care of their newborn daughter and getting everything ready for their trip to Europe. Their oldest daughter, Alyssa, actually spent the night at Candy's house, and she was supposed to come back later that day because she had swim practice. However, Alyssa and Candy's daughter really wanted to have another sleepover, so Candy called Betty and asked her if it was okay if Alyssa spent another night there. Betty told Candy that Alyssa had swim practice, and that's when Candy offered to go to Betty's house, pick up the swimsuit, and take Alyssa to practice. So Betty agreed to this plan. Later that morning, Candy stopped by Betty's house to pick up the bathing suit, and then she left. As the day continued to progress, Alan called the house just to check in on Betty, but he wasn't able to get in contact with her. He called one of the neighbors to go check on Betty, and that's when they discovered that Betty was dead. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the true story behind Candy on Hulu and Love and Death on HBO Max, and how Betty Gore was axed 41 times. So when a couple of the neighbors went to the Gore house, they realized that the front door was unlocked. They walked inside and they could hear baby Bethany, which was Alan and Betty's newborn baby, crying. They went to go look inside baby Bethany's bedroom, and that's when they realized that she was completely alone. The neighbors continued walking around the house looking for any signs of Betty, and when they walked inside the laundry room, that's when they discovered the body of 30-year-old Betty Gore. The neighbors say that this scene was absolutely horrific. There was blood all over the walls, all over the floor, and Betty was almost unrecognizable. Neighbors called the police, and they also called Alan and told him that his wife was dead. Alan just couldn't believe it, and one of the first things he did after hearing this news was that he called Candace Montgomery and let her know that her best friend was dead. Candy was just as shocked. I mean, she was at Betty's house earlier that day picking up a bathing suit. She told Alan that everything seemed fine earlier and she doesn't understand how this happened. Investigators immediately arrived to the scene, and they determined that the murder weapon was an axe that belonged to Betty and Alan. They found axe wounds on her face, head, hands, arm, torso, and legs. She had a total of 42 wounds, 28 which were to her head and face. Based on the amount of overkill, police believe that whoever killed Betty did this in a state of rage and that this was a crime of passion. As usual, police looked into the husband first, but he had a solid alibi. They asked Alan, okay, do you have any enemies? Do you know of anyone who might have done this to your wife? Alan said he had no idea who could have done this, that all he knew is that Candy had stopped by earlier that day to pick up Alyssa's bathing suit, and that was it. So police go speak to Candy, and she basically tells them the same thing. And police don't really suspect she's lying about anything because they honestly believe that a man is the one that did this. Based on the amount of overkill and the amount of strength it would have taken to swing this axe over and over again, they honestly believe that a woman could not have done this. So police go back to Alan to see if he has any other information that could help, and that's when Alan tells them, I have to tell you something. And he tells the police that he was having an affair with Candy Montgomery. Yes, he was sleeping with his wife's best friend. Alan said that the affair started in 1978, just 2 years before Betty's death. That this all started after the two of them reached for the same ball during a church volleyball game. Apparently, Candy was bored in her marriage and she had been wanting to start an affair for some time. So she asked Alan, do you want to have an affair with me? And the two of them even made a pros and cons list about what this affair would mean. In the end, they decided to have an affair, so they would meet up at hotels together, they would go on lunch dates, all while Alan is still married to Betty and while Candy is pretending to be Betty's best friend. I mean, she even threw Betty a baby shower, knowing that she was sleeping with her husband this entire time. After the birth of their second daughter, that's when Alan decided to end the affair. And apparently Candy was not happy about this. Detectives bring Candy down to the police station, they re-interview her, and they ask her if she'll take a polygraph test. And Candy says no. Police start looking for more evidence to tie it back to Candy, and that's when they discovered a bloody footprint found in the freezer inside the laundry room. They also found a pair of sunglasses and blood in the shower. Go to part 3. Final part on the true story behind Candy on Hulu and Love and Death on HBO Max, and how Betty Gore was axed 41 times. Investigators find the bloody thumbprint. They also find a pair of sunglasses glasses, and they also discover blood in the bathroom, meaning that whoever killed Betty showered in Betty's bathroom to get rid of the blood. It's crazy, I know. After finding all of this evidence, they realize that it all leads back to Candy Montgomery. So on June 27th, 1980, 30-year-old Candace Montgomery was arrested and charged for the murder of Betty Gore. She actually turned herself in, and as she was changing into her prison clothes, staff members noticed that she had bruises and a cut on her foot. And they believe that she got these cuts and bruises while she was swinging the axe up and down. Her trial began in August of 1980, and at first she pleaded not guilty. However, on the 8th day of her trial, her defense team changed her story, and they said that yes, Candy did kill Betty, but that it was in self-defense. So this is what Candy claims happened. That day, she went to Betty's house to pick up the bathing suit, and when she got there, Betty confronted her and asked her, "Are you having an affair with Alan?" At first, Candy denied it. She said no, she was not having an affair with her husband, but that's when Betty told her, "I know the truth," and she showed Candy these love letters that she found between her and Alan. So she could not deny the love letters, and that's when she decided to admit to the affair. Then she says Betty walked away, went over to the laundry room, and when she came back, she was now standing there holding an axe. According to Candy, Betty started to attack her, and she pushed her inside the laundry room. She tried to run away, she tried to fight back, but she says that Betty would not stop swinging the axe. Betty and Candy were shouting at each other, they were fighting, and this commotion ended up waking up Betty's newborn baby, Bethany. Bethany started crying, and that's when Candy says Betty turned to her and shushed her. And according to Candy, that triggered her. She grabbed the axe from Betty and began hitting Betty with the axe over and over again. She hit her over 41 times, and the only reason she stopped is because she got exhausted. After that, she dropped the axe, walked over to the bathroom, took a shower, and then left. She left Betty there dead in the laundry room with baby Bethany all by herself crying. After this, she went to church, she picked up her kids, including Betty's kid, Alyssa. She took Alyssa to swim practice and then went to the movies later that night. The fact that she was just hanging out with Alyssa, taking her to swim practice, taking her to the movies, knowing that she had just murdered her mother is insane. Now she says that the was a trigger because her mother used to always shush her when she was younger, and that just sent her into a frenzy. Now the prosecution was not buying this theory. They said that Candy could have easily walked away. She didn't need to grab the axe and axe Betty 41 times. And yes, if it was self-defense, maybe she could have axed her, 1 to 2 times, but 41 times is overkill. But in less than 4 hours on October 29th, 1980, the jury came back and they said that they found Candy Montgomery not guilty. To this day, Betty Gore did not receive the justice that she deserved. My thoughts and prayers go out to Betty's family, and it's just really heartbreaking how Candy to this day claims that it was just self-defense. Hulu and HBO came out with a series about what happened to Betty Gore, but just remember that it is over-dramatized and that it's not all factual. This is what happened to sister Sarah and Amina Saeed and how they identified their killer in a 911 call. Amina was born on March 3rd, 1989 in Dallas, Texas, and her younger sister Sarah was born on March 16th, 1990, also in Dallas, Texas. They had an older brother named Islam, and their parents were Patricia Owens and Yasser Saeed. There's a very big age gap between Patricia and Yasser. When they started dating, Patricia was only 14 years old and Yasser was 29. Within 3 weeks of dating, Yasser and Patricia decided to get married. Now, the only way that Patricia was allowed to get married is by her parents' permission. The way they got this is that Yasser told her family that he was wealthy and that he would provide for Patricia. Now, Patricia's family didn't come from a lot of money, so when they heard this, they agreed and they allowed Patricia to marry Yasser at 15 years old. However, what Yasser said wasn't technically true. He didn't come from a lot of money. In fact, he actually worked as a taxi driver, which there's nothing wrong with, but he lied to Patricia. They got married and she actually had to work multiple jobs to help provide for the family. About 6 months into their marriage, things started to go downhill. Patricia claims that Yasser became physically and mentally abusive. When Amina and Sarah were 8 and 9 years old, they told their maternal grandmother that their father, Yasser, had been essaying them for about 2 to 3 years. Of course, the grandmother told Patricia about what the girls had said, so Patricia packed up their things and moved out. Officers went to go speak to Amina and Sarah, and they told the police that their father had put his front part into their front part. However, before Yasser could get arrested, the girls recanted their statement. Now, Patricia's side of the family believes that Yasser somehow convinced Patricia to convince the girls to recant everything and to admit that they made everything up. And for some reason, police just believed them and they never followed through with the investigation. After they recanted their statement, they packed everything back up and they moved back in with Yasser. Even though they recanted their statement, a lot of people feel like the girls were telling the truth. There are these home videos made by Yasser and they just make you feel so uncomfortable. In this video here, Amina and Sarah were in their bed trying to hide from their father. He kept filming them and the girls kept telling him to go away, to erase the footage, and to leave them alone. At one point, Yasser tells her brother Islam to remove the girl's blanket, and Islam does. After the blankets get removed, Yasser starts to tell the girls that they have very nice legs, and he also zooms in on Sarah's butt. Yes, he's zooming in on his own daughter's body. It's just very creepy, and you can clearly see that both girls are uncomfortable with their father. By the time the girls were teenagers, Yasser was already trying to set them up with an arranged marriage back in Egypt. Obviously, the girls did not want this. They wanted to date and, find their own person, but Yasser wanted to set them up. On December 24th, 2007, Amina refused another one of her dad's proposals for an arranged marriage. And this made him angry, so Patricia and the girls packed up their things and left. Everyone kept telling Patricia to not go back to Yasser, but unfortunately, she did. Amina actually had a secret boyfriend at the time, and when she found out that her mom was going back to Yasser, she texted him this. January 1st, 2008, 911 received a phone call from 17-year-old Sarah Saeed. She told the operator, "Help me, my dad shot me, I'm dying." Okay, more in part 2. Part 2 on what happened to sisters Amina and Sarah Saeed and how they identified their killer in a 911 call. So 911 gets a call from Sarah at around 7:30 p.m. and she says, "Help, my dad shot me, I'm dying." The 911 operator asks her, "Are you okay? What's going on, ma'am?" And she replies and says, "I'm dying, that's what's up." You can then hear Sarah pleading for her life, asking her father to stop shooting her. Then Sarah goes silent. Meanwhile, 911 is trying to track down their location so they can go send help, and in that moment they get another 911 call. This time it's from a bystander who says that they see 2 girls' bodies inside the back of a taxi cab. With that information, police arrive to the scene, and that's when they discover the bodies of 18-year-old Amina Saeed and 17-year-old Sarah Saeed. Amina was sitting in the passenger seat of the car and she had been shot twice in the chest. Sarah was sitting in the back seat and she had been shot 9 times. It's shocking how Sarah still had the energy and the strength to call 911 and literally used her last breath to identify the killer as her father. After finding Amina and Sarah, police start searching for Yasser, the killer, but he is nowhere to be found. They go check the family house, they check his work, they check everywhere, but it's like he vanished into thin air. The media immediately got a hold of the case and they started referring to the murders as honor killings. And then Yasser was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Now, when Patricia heard the news that her 2 daughters had been murdered by her husband, their father, of course she was completely heartbroken. She couldn't believe that this had happened, and now she was just left with her son Islam. However, Islam didn't really seem to care that much. He didn't do any interviews talking about what happened to his sisters. He didn't ask for his father to turn himself in, nothing. Now, a lot of people, including Patricia's family, feel like she brought Amina and Sarah back to Yasser knowing that he would murder them. She denies this. She says that she had no idea that Yasser would ever do this to his own daughters. It's just really sad because I feel like Patricia did not do enough to protect her own daughters, starting from when they were just little girls and said that their father had been essaying them. Even after hearing that from the girls, she still let them live with Yasser. Then, just a couple of weeks before the murders, she left Yasser, she moved to Oklahoma, but then she decided to go back. I just feel like Amina and Sarah were failed by their mother. After the murders, people suspected that Yasser had immediately fled to Egypt, but there was never any proof of that. 12 years went by without any movement in the case until August of 2020. This is when police started a 24-hour surveillance of a home in Justin, Texas. During this time, they saw Islam, Amina and Sarah's older brother, and their uncle coming and going from the house. Along with them, they also saw the shadow of someone moving inside the house, who they believed was Yasser. On August 26, 2020, police were able to get a search warrant, and when they went inside the house, they found Yasser Saeed. He was found hidden inside a room with a cot in the back of the house's garage. Yasser, Islam, and the uncle were arrested, and their trials began in 2021. Islam was sentenced to 10 years in prison for harboring a fugitive. The uncle was sentenced to 12 years, and Yasser was sentenced to life in prison. I'm glad that Amina and Sarah got the justice that they deserve. This is what happened to 14-year-old Alicia Navarro and how she left this note saying she would return but hasn't come back yet. Alicia Navarro was born on September 20th, 2004 to her parents Jessica and Ivan Nunez. She was the oldest of 2. She had a younger brother and a younger sister. She lived in Glendale, Arizona, and she had a dog named Sushi that she absolutely adored. Alicia has autism, and her mother Jessica was pretty much her main caretaker. She would take her to her therapy sessions, to her doctor's appointments, and they had a very close relationship. Social interactions were really overwhelming for Alicia, so she did have a little group of friends, but she would mainly spend her time online. She loved to go on gaming forums, she would go on Discord, and she had a lot of online friends. Now, Jessica was never too worried about what her daughter was doing online because she felt like her daughter was safe. She figured Alicia was safe inside the house. She knew about what websites her daughter was looking at. She just wanted her daughter to be happy. It was very difficult for Alicia to socialize with people in person, so she wanted to make friends online, and that was the way that Alicia would be happy. Then her mother supported it. At the time of her disappearance, Alicia was 14 years old and she was a freshman in high school. Now, this was a big transition for her, but she actually was making friends in person and she was actually happy. And her mother, Jessica, was just so happy that this big change wasn't too overwhelming for Alicia. Alicia took great comfort in having a strict routine. If this routine was disrupted, she would get agitated. So, for example, she liked to listen to the same type of music, which was normally pop hits. She would eat the same type of foods. She only wore long sleeve shirts, even in the hot Arizona weather. This is just what worked for Alicia, but in the months leading up to her disappearance, things started to change. She started to show new interests, so instead of listening to pop music, she started listening to rock, such as Pink Floyd. She started to read more comic books, specifically Marvel's Demon in a Bottle series. She also started to ask her mother if she could buy some body sprays and perfumes, which Jessica found a little bit odd. Normally, she never wore perfume or anything like that because she had an aversion to overpowering smells. But now, she really wanted some perfume, and she also started asking her mom if she could wear some makeup. On top of all those changes, she also started asking her mom if she could buy some more, kind of provocative clothing. She went from always wearing a long sleeve shirt to now asking her mom if she could buy her an open back shirt. Jessica found these new interests a little bit odd, but she just figured that maybe it was because of high school. Maybe her friends had peer pressured her to start wearing makeup, more provocative clothing, things like that. September 14th, 2019, just 5 days before her 15th birthday, Alicia asked her mom if she could stay home from school. Jessica agreed and they had a wonderful day together. They went to McDonald's, they went to get their eyebrows threaded, and they went to a chocolate shop. When they got home later that night, she said that she heard Alicia laughing in her bedroom. The next morning, at around 7 a.m., Jessica went downstairs to start making breakfast for the family, and that's when she noticed that the back door was cracked open. She asked her husband if he left the door open, and he said no. So she went outside to see what had happened, and that's when she saw that there were 2 chairs leaning against the brick wall. They ran over to Alicia's room to see if everything was okay, but Alicia was gone. All they found was this note from Alicia that said, "I ran away, I will be back, I swear, I'm sorry." Okay, more in part 2. Part 2 on what happened to 14-year-old Alicia Navarro and how she left this note saying she would return but hasn't come back yet. Jessica finds this note in Alicia's bedroom and she says that it seems like her daughter wrote this in a hurry. Normally, Alicia had very pretty handwriting, but this handwriting looked a little bit messy. So after finding the note and finding the 2 chairs leaned against the brick wall, Jessica assumed that her daughter had snuck out of the house and had used the chairs to climb over the wall. Normally this gate was unlocked, but she figures that maybe Alicia thought that the gate would make too much noise, and that's why she decided to just climb over the wall. As soon as she realized that her daughter Alicia was missing, she called the Glendale Police Department and reported her daughter as missing. Police immediately arrived to the scene and they started going through Alicia's bedroom to see if they could find any type of evidence. They discovered that Alicia had taken her laptop, her comic books, her cell phone, and body sprays. Along with that, she had also taken a small backpack adorned with metallic cat ears. What they thought was odd is that Alicia didn't take any of her cell phone or laptop chargers. So it honestly seemed like she did plan on returning home since she didn't take any of her chargers with her or any of her clothes. They tried to track her cell phone to see if they could figure out where it would last ping, but her cell phone had been turned off since the morning she disappeared. She also didn't take any of her medication with her, and Jessica says that she needs this medication. So all of these things combined together again made police and the family believe that Alicia truly wanted to return. They started looking at the evidence found outside of the house and they saw that there were some footprints leading from the backyard to the front yard. Well, they checked those footprints and they confirmed that those were Alicia Navarro's footprints. They also checked the neighbor surveillance cameras, but they did not capture Alicia leaving. The FBI joined the case about 2 weeks later and they went through all of Alicia's internet history, her gaming history, everything to see if that could help with the investigation. They discovered that 11 days before her disappearance, she had messaged a 20-year-old man named Clark through Discord. In these messages, Alicia told Clark that she had sold her Xbox, which she really loved because she loved to game, and that she had a boyfriend. But she didn't give any specific details about who this boyfriend was. Police looked into Clark, they looked through all of his history, and they ended up clearing him. He says that him and Alicia were part of the same online gaming group, and he also found it odd that Alicia would run away from home. Because again, she was very shy and timid. Jessica and the rest of the family started to believe that Alicia had been lured by an online predator. The reason for that is because, again, Alicia spent the majority of her time online. There was one incident that Jessica had caught Alicia giving personal information to a man online. As soon as she saw that happen, she sat Alicia down and told her about the dangers of speaking to strangers and that she shouldn't share these details with anyone. And there was another incident where Jessica actually filed a police report with the Arizona Police Department because Alicia was speaking to a man online that was much older than her. This man was asking Alicia questions such as, "Do you have any stuffed animals?" He also said, "Well, if you don't have any stuffed animals, I can be your stuffed animal." It was just a very inappropriate conversation, so she reported it to the police, but they didn't really do much about it. And one day Jessica noticed that there was a hole about the size of a golf ball in Alicia's window. Okay, more in part 3. This is part 3 on what happened to 14-year-old Alicia Navarro and how she left this note saying she would come back but hasn't returned yet. Jessica found this hole that was about the size of a golf ball inside of Alicia's window, and when she asked Alicia about it, she said that a bird had done it. However, her husband investigated the window, and it seems like this hole was made from inside the room, not from the outside. So if that's the case, how could a bird have done this? Maybe Alicia made this hole herself, but why? 2 weeks before her disappearance, she went to the mall with a friend named Cody, and when she came back from the mall, she told her mom that Cody had this guy friend who was very into fitness, protein shakes, things like that. Soon after, Alicia started asking for protein powder. She started asking her mom for supplements. It's just all very odd, and unfortunately, to this day in 2023, Alicia Navarro is still missing. Jessica truly believes that her daughter was chatting with someone online that convinced her to run away from home. But that Alicia did have plans to return because, again, she didn't take her medication with her. She didn't take any of her chargers, any of her clothes, nothing. So she does want to return, but there's something preventing her from coming home. There were actually 2 potential sightings of Alicia at a local park that was about 1.5 miles away from her home. These sightings happened just a few days after she disappeared, and people said that they saw Alicia walking on foot in this park with a man covered in tattoos. He had tattoos on his face, on his body, his hands, everywhere. Now, of course, Jessica and the police went to go investigate, but there's no surveillance cameras at this park, so there's really no way to corroborate these claims. Jessica has come out and said that she thought her daughter was safe inside her home because she was using the internet at the house, the laptops at the house, everything. But she says she didn't realize that people were inside her home without her realizing it. I've seen a couple of organizations say this, organizations that talk about online predators. And they say you can lock your doors, you can lock your windows, you can do everything to prevent people from coming inside your house. But what a lot of people don't realize is that they can come in through your internet, through your computer, through your cell phone, through your Xbox. It's so important to talk to your kids about the dangers of being online, about chatting with strangers, things like that. Jessica wants other parents to be aware of this, and she doesn't want this to happen to any other child. Jessica is an amazing advocate for her daughter. She actually has her own TikTok and Facebook page, so I will tag those down below so you guys can show her some support. She wants people to continue to share Alicia's story because you never know who might see Alicia's face and think, I know her, I know where she is. And, Jessica just wants her daughter to know that if she's still out there, that she can come home, that she's not mad at her, and that she still loves her. My thoughts and prayers go out to Jessica, to Alicia's family and friends. I am so sorry that this happened to her, and I truly hope that you all get the answers you are looking for and that Alicia is found. There is a GoFundMe open to help put up billboards with Alicia's information, and there also is a $20,000 reward in this case. What happened to Eric Richins and how he told his family that he thought his wife was trying to kill him. Eric Richins was born on May 13th, 1982 in Utah to his parents Gene and Linda Richins. His family was very well known in the community, and everyone says that Eric was a wonderful guy. He actually decided to open his own masonry business with his friend Cody, and they would do a lot of stonework. So because of this type of work, he would often have to go to Home Depot. And in one of the many times that Eric had to go to Home Depot, he met a girl named Corey. Corey worked as a cashier at Home Depot, and her coworker Linda says that Corey was really kind, that she was very outgoing, and that she was kind of like the it girl at Home Depot. Like all the other employees thought that she was like the most beautiful girl ever, and that she just had a really nice smile. So one day Eric went to Home Depot, and that's when he met Corey, and he asked her out on a date. Fast forward to June of 2013, the pair ended up getting married, and they eventually had 3 children together. Corey ended up leaving her job at Home Depot, and she got into real estate and started flipping homes. Everyone says that Eric was a family guy. He loved his children and he loved his wife, and he just wanted all of them to have the best life possible. He was a very involved parent, and he would coach on all of his sons' teams. It honestly seemed like Eric had it all. He had 3 wonderful children and a loving wife. But as we know, things aren't always as they seem. On March 3rd, 2022, Eric and Corey were hanging out at the family home. Their 3 children were already asleep, and the pair were awake celebrating the closing of a house that Corey had just made. At around 9 p.m., Eric decided that it was time for bed, so he went upstairs to start getting ready, and that's when Corey decided to make him a Moscow Mule. She made him the drink, and then she brought it to Eric in bed. He drank the Moscow Mule, he had a THC gummy, and then he went to sleep. Not long after that, Corey woke up because one of their sons was having a nightmare. So she got up, she went to go comfort her child, and then she accidentally fell asleep in the child's bedroom. At around 3 a.m., she woke up and decided to head back to the master bedroom to continue to sleep with Eric. However, when she walked into the bedroom, that's when she saw that Eric was unresponsive and cold to the touch. She immediately grabbed her phone that had been charging on the nightstand the entire night, and she called 911. Police and EMTs immediately arrived at the scene, and they did everything they could to try and revive Eric, but unfortunately, he was declared dead. This was very shocking to everyone because Eric was 39 years old, so he was relatively young and healthy. A toxicology report was done, and it concluded that Eric was killed by a large amount of fentanyl. The fentanyl wasn't medical grade, it was most likely something that you would get on the street. Now this was shocking because Eric did not have a history of doing hard drugs. It was just a lot for everyone to take in, and of course Corey and her 3 children were absolutely heartbroken. Corey just didn't know what to do to comfort her children, so that's when she decided to write a children's book about grief. She would read this book to her children every single night night to help them deal with the loss of their father. She even went on the news to talk about this book and why she wrote it. However, the night her episode premiered, one of the news anchors that interviewed Corey received an anonymous email that said, "You know she killed her husband, right?" Okay, more in part 2. Part 2 on what happened to Eric Richins and how he told his family that he thought his wife was trying to kill him. The news anchor receives an anonymous email that says, "You know she killed her husband, right?" News anchors just didn't take it seriously because they just assumed that it was like a prank email. But then the next day, the news broke out that Corey Richins had been arrested for the murder of her husband. So let's talk about how this all happened. After Eric died in March of 2022, the family truly believed that Corey had something to do with his death. They knew that it wasn't an accidental overdose, and they honestly believed that Eric had been poisoned. And the reason they thought this is because Eric had told him that Corey had tried to poison him before. Eric and Corey had gone to Greece a few years back, and during that trip, Corey gave Eric a drink, and after he drank it, he became violently ill. He actually called his sister during this trip and said that he thought his wife was trying to kill him. But he never reported this to the police. In another instance, on Valentine's Day 2022, just a month before Eric's death, Corey had made him a sandwich and she left it on the seat of his truck. Eric ate the sandwich and then immediately broke out into hives. He could not breathe and he had to take Benadryl and use his child's EpiPen to save himself. He called his friend and business partner Cody and told him that he thought his wife was trying to poison him. But once again, he did not report this to the police. There were 2 times before his death that Corey had allegedly tried to poison him. I'm not sure why he never went to the police or why Eric's family didn't report her or, why she wasn't behind bars for allegedly doing this. As soon as police heard about these alleged attempts to poison Eric, they started looking deeper into Corey. And that's when they discovered messages between Corey and a man named CL. Corey allegedly reached out to CL between December of 2021 and February of 2022, and she asked CL for drugs. She said she needed help getting prescription pain medication for an investor who had very bad back pain. So she ended up buying pills from him, and then 2 weeks later she messaged CL again asking him for something stronger. She specifically asked for that Michael Jackson stuff, specifying that she wanted fentanyl. February 11th, 2022, CL sold her about $900 worth of pills. And then a few days later, on February 14th, Valentine's Day, Eric ate that sandwich and then had a very bad allergic reaction. Weeks later, Corey purchased another $900 worth of fentanyl pills. And then 6 days later, Eric was found dead. So investigators see all of this, and now they're starting to put the pieces together. It was also discovered that Corey was in thousands and thousands of debt. And she had also taken out 4 life insurance policies on Eric that totaled almost $2 million. A lot of people wondered why Eric stayed with Corey after she tried to allegedly poison him twice. Well, according to the family's attorney, they state that Eric wanted his children to have a happy household. He wanted his kids to grow up with a 2-parent household, and honestly, a lot of people feel like he probably still loved Corey even after everything she did to him. However, it was discovered that Eric had seen a divorce attorney, and we're not sure if Corey knew about this. If what she did is true, I just can't believe that she wrote a grief book that she would read to her children every single night to help them get through the loss of their father, all knowing that she's the one that killed him in the first place. It's honestly shocking what people will do for money, and how you can marry someone, but they can still be a complete stranger. Her preliminary hearing has been scheduled for June 12th, so we'll see what happens. Let's talk about what happened to Jacob Landine and how his killer is still out there. Jacob was born on July 1st, 1986 to his mother Brenda and to his father Gene in Texas. He had an older brother named Eric, and Eric was so excited about having a new baby brother. This is something that he really wanted for a long time, and the day that Jacob was born was just like the best day ever for everyone. Now, their father Gene wasn't really in the picture. He was actually having an emotional affair with another woman, and when Brenda found out about that, she decided to leave him. She grabbed the 2 kids, she packed everything up, and they all moved to Socorro, New Mexico. Now, the reason they moved there is because that's where Brenda's family was, so she figured that they would be able to help watch the children while she went to work and, help provide for the family. Now, during this time, Brenda started to grow closer to an old family friend. Now, Eric asked that we do not use this man's name, so for the sake of the video, I'm just going to refer to him as Nick. Nick and Brenda pretty much grew up together. His sister actually married Brenda's brother, and his aunt was Eric's godmother. So in a way, they all had some type of connection, and when Nick entered their life, Eric was very happy about this. Nick was very kind to him. He would watch movies with Eric, he would take care of baby Jacob, and Eric just felt like this was the father figure that he had been looking for. He was just very charismatic, and in December of 1986, Brenda and Nick decided to move in together with the 2 children. Unfortunately, soon after Nick entered their lives, baby Jacob started to receive unexplained injuries. The first incident that happened is when Brenda noticed that Jacob had a skinned ear. So she took him to the doctor, and as they were trying to figure out what happened, Nick came over to Brenda and said that Eric was responsible for this injury. Said that Eric had picked up Jacob from his crib and then dropped him to the floor. That the reason he had done this is because Eric was jealous of his new baby brother. So Brenda goes over to Eric, she asks him about this, and she was able to get Eric to admit that yes, he did this. Now keep in mind that at this time, Jacob is only 6 to 7 months old and Eric is 6 years old. So for a 6-year-old to reach over to a crib, pick up a baby, and then drop him to the ground, it just kind of seemed odd. But this is what Nick was telling Brenda. He was telling her that he had seen Eric be jealous before and that this wasn't the first time that Eric had injured baby Jacob. The second injury occurred 2 to 3 weeks later. This is when the kid's grandmother, Merlinda, was taking care of baby Jacob and noticed a lump on his head. Took him to the doctor and they told her that this injury came from a blow to the head and that Jacob had a hematoma, and that his injury needed to be drained and lanced immediately. This is a huge injury. This isn't something that's caused by just like playing around or getting a thump on the head. Once again, Nick blamed Eric for this injury and he told Brenda that he saw Eric kick baby Jacob in the head. Eric says that he has no memory of actually kicking baby Jacob, but he just feels like that would not be possible. He was only 6 years old, so how could a kick from a 6-year-old cause such a big injury? Again, no one saw Eric kick baby Jacob. The only person that saw this was Nick. And at this point, he had been blaming Eric for all of these unexplained injuries that baby Jacob had. After all of this happened, Brenda decided to send Eric to go live in California with his father. However, even with Eric out of the picture, the injuries to baby Jacob did not stop. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on what happened to Jacob Blondin and how his killer is still out there. So even after Eric moved to California, the injuries to Jacob continued. Now this is when Brenda started to suspect that maybe Eric was not responsible for the injuries and that maybe Nick was. During this time, Brenda was working at a local supermarket and during her shift, she would leave Jacob in the care of Nick. However, now that Brenda was suspecting that maybe Nick was injuring Jacob, she started to leave Jacob in the care of her mother, Merlinda. But unfortunately, that's not what happened on Thursday, April 9th, 1987. That day, Brenda was scheduled to work at the supermarket from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And as usual, she left Jacob in the care of her mother, Merlinda. However, that day, Merlinda really wanted to go to church and she didn't want to take Jacob with her. So she called Brenda and asked her if it would be okay if she went to church. Now, Brenda really didn't want to do this, but she told her mother that yes, she could go to church and that she could drop Jacob off at Nick's house. I mean, Brenda only had about an hour left of her shift, so she figured, what could happen in an hour? She told Merlinda about the plan, and Merlinda went to go drop off Jacob at Nick's house. Now, as soon as that happened, Brenda says that she got a really bad feeling in her stomach, and she wanted to leave work early. So she went to go speak to her manager, and she told him that she needed to leave, but he said no, that she needed to stay. And then an hour later at 7 p.m., Nick comes running inside the supermarket looking for Brenda. He finds Brenda and tells her that Jacob had fallen off the couch and that he wasn't breathing and that he was currently in an ambulance. Brenda just couldn't believe this and they immediately rushed to the hospital, and when they got there, the doctor said that Jacob was in a coma and that he had a very serious head injury. He was bleeding in his cranial vault and he was close to hemorrhaging. They had to put him in emergency surgery, but unfortunately, the doctors did everything that they could to save Jacob, but he did not make it. The doctors went to go notify Brenda and Nick, and Brenda just absolutely lost it. I mean, her heart was broken. Her baby was gone. She left the room to go cry by herself, and that's when the doctor started talking to Nick, and Nick told him, "This is gonna make me look really bad." The doctor felt like this was weird. Like, why are you saying that after a baby just died? Eric was in California when he heard the news about his baby brother, and he just couldn't believe it. Him and his dad immediately got on a plane, and they flew to New Mexico. This was just a lot for everyone to take in, and when investigators asked Brenda if she thought that Nick had done this, she said no. She truly felt like this was an accident, but either way, she decided to leave Nick and she moved into her parents' home with Eric. However, Nick did not leave them alone. Every single day he would harass Brenda, he would send her notes, he would show up to her parents' home trying to win her back. He kept trying to manipulate Brenda by saying, "Oh, I'll tell you what actually happened to your son, but you have to meet me at his gravestone alone." Which is very odd. Brenda looks back at this and thinks that he wanted to meet her alone so he could kill her. Police actually conducted a polygraph test on Nick and he told the family that he passed. But that was a lie. He actually didn't pass the exam, but for some reason he wasn't detained. He was just let go. After this, I know it's hard to believe, but Brenda did get back together with Nick and she eventually married him. In her mind, if she stayed close to Nick, then maybe one day she would find out the truth about what actually happened to her baby. But she never did. She eventually divorced Nick, and now the case is reopened, but Nick is still out there. He has never been arrested for the death of Jacob Blondin, and to this day, the family is still looking for justice. Jacob's older brother, Eric, has his own true crime podcast called True Consequences, which I highly recommend you guys listen to. He did a 3-part series about what happened to his baby brother. He interviewed his dad, his mom. I mean, he just wants answers as to what actually happened, and he doesn't understand why Nick is still free. Thankfully, the case is reopened, but things have been been moving slowly, and all the family wants is justice. It's so sad what happened to Jacob. I mean, he was just an innocent little baby. I don't understand how people can abuse a child. And it breaks my heart that for so many years, Eric was blamed for what happened to Jacob. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family, and I just truly hope that you all get the justice that you're looking for. Talk about what happened to George Torres and how his girlfriend trapped him inside this suitcase. George Torres was born on February 13th, 1978 to his parents George and Blanca. A couple of brothers, and he was really close to his family. His mother Blanca says that her son was not perfect. I mean, no one is perfect, but she says that her son did make mistakes and, he did do things in life that he regretted. Despite him not being a perfect person, he was still a good son and a lot of people loved him. He had 3 children, and right before his death, he was working at a local hardware store and he was really passionate about this job. In 2017, George met a woman named Sarah Boone. 2 of them met at a bar where they were playing some pool, they hit it off, and then about a year later, they decided to move in together. Now, Sarah is an interesting person. She was born on October 10th, 1977, and just like George, she had previously been married and she also had a child. Sarah's ex-husband is named Brian, and he has come out and spoken about how his relationship was with Sarah. And he says that Sarah was absolutely nuts. She was an alcoholic, and she would go out every single night to different clubs and bars, and she wouldn't come home until 4 o'clock in the morning. She would be doing all of this on school nights while their son was sleeping. She would always choose alcohol before her family, so Brian had enough and he decided to divorce Sarah. He ended up just moving down the street from his house, and they would share custody of their son. Now, when Sarah and George started dating, Brian says that their relationship was not good. He would often have to go to Sarah's apartment to go drop off their son, and anytime he would go there, he would try to avoid Sarah and George because they were always fighting. At one point, Sarah had George arrested around 5 to 6 times for domestic violence, and then another time, both of them were arrested. They kind of had a reoccurring cycle where they would get drunk, they would fight, they would get really toxic, Sarah would call the police, have George arrested, bail him out the next day, and then they would just repeat the cycle. The one time that Sarah and George were both arrested was because they allegedly went to a bar and a man was speaking to Sarah, which made George jealous. When they got to the house, Sarah says that George started dragging her up the stairs and then he punched her in the face. So police were called to the scene, but George had a different story. He says that he wasn't the aggressor, that Sarah was the aggressor, and that she was trying to strangle him, and that the only way she could stop her from doing this was by kicking her. If he hadn't kicked her, then he says that Sarah would have incapacitated him. That's how hard she was strangling him. Police couldn't determine who was the main aggressor, and they ended up arresting both of them. However, the charges against each of them were later dropped because neither one of them wanted to pursue it any further. As you can see, they were both just toxic, and this relationship was not good. Everyone around them said that something bad was bound to happen. February 23rd, 2020, Sarah and George were at their apartment having what they called a good day. They were drinking some wine on the back porch, they had some cigarettes, they did a puzzle together, they painted, and then they decided to play a game of hide and seek. Sarah says that George thought it would be funny if he got inside the suitcase and hid from her. Sarah helped George get inside the suitcase. She zipped it up, not all the way. Says that she left the little hole open so that he could stick his fingers in there and unzip himself. Then afterwards, she just went to bed. She figured that he would later unzip himself from the suitcase and then join her. However, the next morning when she woke up, she realized that George was still inside the suitcase and that he wasn't breathing. Okay, go to part 2. Part 2 on what happened to George Torres and how his girlfriend trapped him inside the suitcase. Sarah wakes up and she realizes that George is still inside the suitcase and that he's no longer breathing. Instead of calling 911 immediately, she decides to call her ex-husband Brian. She tells Brian what happened and she tells him to come over, but Brian is like, okay, I'll go over, but you have to call 911 right now. Brian arrives to the house a few minutes later. He asks Sarah, did you call 911 yet? And she says no. Brian is like, okay, you need to call them right now, and that's when Sarah finally decides to call 911 and report George's death. Police arrive at the scene and they start asking Sarah about what happened. She kept saying that this was just an accident, and then she kept asking to go inside and grab her Dr. Pepper. She said that she was really thirsty and that she had really bad cotton mouth, and she kept telling the officer, can I go in there and get my Dr. Pepper, please? The officer was like, no, you cannot go in there because it's literally a crime scene. But Sarah would not stop asking the officer if she could go in there to grab her Dr. Pepper. Eventually, she got so thirsty that she literally leaned over and started drinking the water from the outdoor faucet. After that, she went back to one of the officers and asked them if they could go to the back porch and grab her cigarette. Yeah, she literally asked a police officer if they could give her a cigarette. The officer, of course, said no because you can't go inside a crime scene, and this just kind of went on for about like 40 minutes. Sarah just wouldn't sit still, and the officers just kept telling her to just remain calm because they were trying to figure out, what happened to George. An autopsy was conducted on George, and it revealed some very disturbing details. George had a laceration on his lip, he had bruising around his eye, he had scratches on his back, among other injuries. The medical examiner says that these injuries were recent. Also determined that George died of positional asphyxia with environmental suffocation consistent with prolonged confinement. They believe that George was inside that suitcase for 11 hours or more. At first, police were thinking, maybe this was an accident. Maybe they were playing hide and seek and then things just ended badly. However, after learning what the autopsy concluded, they realized that maybe this wasn't an accident. And then when they looked through Sarah's phone, they found some more disturbing evidence. The night of George's death, Sarah had recorded 2 videos. In this video, you can see George inside the suitcase asking Sarah to let him out. He keeps telling Sarah that he can't breathe and that he wants to get out of here, but Sarah just ignores him and laughs at him. George tells her, "Sarah, I can't breathe," and Sarah says, "Yeah, that's how I feel when you choke me." Then just keeps saying, "Sarah?" and Sarah says, "Yeah, that's my name, don't wear it out." So he was literally asking Sarah to let him out and told her that he couldn't breathe, but Sarah just ignored him. Police look at these videos on the phone and they realize that this wasn't an accident. It's not like Sarah did fall asleep and just assume that George was okay. She literally recorded herself mocking George and just watching him suffer slowly. Detectives show Sarah this video and she just says that it was a joke. However, police tell her it's not a joke. You literally let this man suffer to death. In the end, they arrested Sarah Boone and charged her with second-degree murder for the death of her boyfriend, George Torres. Sarah claims that she's innocent and her trial has been set for July 24th, so we will see what happens. My thoughts and prayers go out to George's family. Even though he wasn't a perfect person, he still didn't deserve this. No one deserves to die in a tiny suitcase suffocating to death, so I hope he gets justice. What happened to 12-year-old Melissa Chavez and how they tried to cover up her murder with a fire. Melissa Chavez was born in 2008 in Coquimbo, Chile to her mother Mirta and her father Dennis. She was the youngest of 4 and she's described as being a very shy, quiet, and reserved child. She didn't really like to go out much. One of her favorite activities was to stay home, go in her room, put her headphones on, and just listen to music. She didn't have that many friends, but everyone says that she was really kind and just a happy little girl. Shortly after Melissa was born, her parents ended up getting a divorce, so now Mirta was a single mother. In order to make ends meet, she got a job working at a local bar called La Chilenita. And while she was working there, she met a man named Luis Santander. Now, Luis was actually in a relationship at the time, so he had a girlfriend, but he decided to leave his girlfriend so he could start dating Mirta, who was 8 years older than him. The 2 of them started dating, and then in 2010, they decided to take the next step and move in together. Eventually got married, and Mirta got pregnant and gave birth to a baby boy. Now, as for Melissa, her older siblings were already gone. They had moved out and, started their own lives. So now Melissa was just living with her mother Mirta, her new stepfather Luis, and then her new half-brother. Everything seemed to be going well, but when Melissa was just 6 years old, she told one of her older sisters that her new stepfather Luis was essaying her. Not only did she tell her sister about this, but she also told her school counselor, and the both of them reported this immediately to her mother Mirta. Now, at first, it honestly seemed like Mirta did believe her daughter. She actually went to the police station and she reported this. However, she later withdrew the report and said that she no longer believed Melissa and that she felt like her daughter was doing this for attention and that she was lying. Yeah, she said this about a 6-year-old little girl reporting her stepfather for essaying her. So even though she withdrew the statement, police still wanted to go through with the investigation because, these are very serious allegations. So they opened an investigation, and in the meantime, they removed Melissa from Mirta's care. This investigation went on for almost 2 years, and the only reason that Melissa was placed back in the custody of her mother Mirta because Mirta told the authorities that she was going to divorce Luis and that he was no longer going to live in the house or be a part of their lives. She told police, it's perfectly safe for Melissa to come back to the house because Luis is no longer going to be there. And authorities and CPS just believed her. They didn't do an investigation to make sure that Mirta was going to divorce him. They didn't go check the house to make sure Luis was no longer there. Nothing. They just believed Mirta, and then they returned Melissa into her custody. They should have done a further investigation because Mirta lied. Luis was still part of their lives. He was still living in the house, and instead of protecting her daughter, she chose this man. November 26, 2020, at around 11:21 in the morning, firefighters and police arrived to Melissa's home after neighbors reported the house on fire. Firefighters went up to the second floor, and when they walked into Melissa's bedroom, they discovered her body lying on the top bunk of her bed. First, firefighters believed that she died due to suffocation from all of the smoke. However, when they got a better view of her body, they realized she didn't die because of the fire. They discovered that she had severe stab wounds to her neck, face, and her body, and that someone tried to cover up the murder with arson. Okay, more in part 2. Part 2 on what happened to 12-year-old Melissa Chavez and how they tried to cover up her murder with arson. Firefighters discovered that she was actually stabbed to death before the fire even started, and whoever had done this had tried to cover up the murder with arson. Melissa was the only person inside the house during the fire, so where was everyone else? Well, police were able to get surveillance footage from a neighbor, and it captured Luis, Melissa's stepfather, and her half-brother leaving the home at around 10:30 in the morning. Then, shortly after, at around 11:15 in the morning, you can see the mother Mirta leaving the home. Then, firefighters and police were called out at around 11:21 in the morning. So what happened in those 6 minutes? So police went to go speak to Mirta and Luis about this, and they defended themselves. They did interviews where they were crying, saying that they couldn't believe that this had happened and that they had nothing to do with this and that they honestly thought a stranger had done this. Someone was watching the house and waited for everyone to leave, and when they finally saw Mirta leaving, that's when they decided to go inside the house, kill Melissa, and then set the house into flames. They were asking for justice, and they wanted whoever had done this to be caught and punished. Police asked Luis, "Where did you and your son go at 10:30 in the morning?" And Luis says that he took his son to his school to get vaccinated. Then they asked Mirta, "Where did you go at 11:15 in the morning?" And she says that she went to the dentist. That morning, she asked Melissa, "Can you go to the dentist with me?" And that Melissa said no, that she wanted to stay home because she was going to go stop by a friend's house later that day to give her a birthday present. So Mirta decided to go to the dentist by herself. Mirta says that she truly believes that when she walked into Melissa's room to ask her if she wanted to go to the dentist, that the killer was inside the room hiding. However, police didn't really believe this. Forensics determined that the fire had started 30 minutes before Mirta even left the house, which means that Mirta was literally inside the home when the fire started. Autopsy was also returned, and it determined that Melissa had a blow to the head and that she had 11 stab wounds. The pathologist says that Melissa could have been saved. If police were called in that moment, they probably could have saved her. However, whoever killed Melissa left her dying there for over an hour before the house was lit on fire. Again, if Melissa was stabbed over an hour before the fire even started, that means that Mirta was still inside the house. So how did Mirta not hear someone come inside the house, go upstairs, brutally attack her daughter, and then start lighting the house on fire? Besides revealing that she had 11 stab wounds and a blow to the head, it was also revealed that Melissa was essayed just 6 hours before her death. This poor 12-year-old girl went through so much before she was killed. With all this evidence, police arrested Mirta and they charged her with parricide and arson. And they also arrested Melissa's stepfather, Luis, for repeated R-wording and essaying Melissa. In the end, Mirta was sentenced to 33 years in prison, while Luis was only sentenced to 10 years. The motive as to why people believe that Mirta did this was out of jealousy for her daughter. Allegedly, she was jealous that her husband, Luis, was giving Melissa more attention than to her. Now, while most people do believe that Mirta did do this, there are some people that have doubt. And the reason for this is because the day of Melissa's death, a neighbor saw a man walking on the roof near the family's house wearing overalls and a gas mask. However, this man has never been found, but a lot of people find it suspicious. What are the odds that a man was wearing a gas mask near the house before it was lit on fire? So some people think that maybe this guy did it, or others believe, maybe Mirta hired this guy to do it. What happened to Melissa just breaks my heart. She was only 12 years old, and she tried to ask for help and she reported the abuse, but nothing was done about it. It's unfortunate that she was sent back to live in this home where she continued to get abused and, she was ultimately murdered.